What's going on, y'all? Live from an undisclosed location. It is 8 Cubes. I am KM Best. I am joined by three-time guest host, Ordinary Harry. Harry, welcome to the show. Last time we had you on, we decided we're just going to let Harry do his thing. However long this episode ends up being, that's how long it's going to be. And that's what we're doing again today. However long this takes, this is how long it's going to take. The episode is as long as the episode is. Welcome to Tautology Club. Welcome to the show, Ordinary Harry.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, we're just going to talk snap, have fun, and hopefully you guys are entertained too with our opinions and thoughts and, passionate, hating opinions about specific cards.
Yelling about green guys a lot. There's going to be a lot of green guy yelling a lot. I think it was actually, you were on the episode where I pioneered my green guy theory. And so far, they've done nothing to disabuse me of the green guy theory. They need to stop making green cards. Speaking of green cards, Sage is coming out. Sage is a 3-0 with the ability to gain power based on the amount of cards with different power at the location she's played, which makes her potentially a very large unit. Now, do you think this card can actually find a place in a metagame? Do you think the Sage card, in a world where people are playing Doc Ock, in a world where people are playing Debris and Goblins, do you think there's room for this card in the metagame?
No, I don't think this card is going to be particularly good. Like, what's the max power? 14 power?
I believe it is 14,
seven,
yes.
Yeah, 7 other cards with different power. I don't think it's going to make a particular splash on the meta. Is it going to be the first green card that does nothing? It's an unreveal card, and then you got to look at what's going on right now, and we're living in a Leech world, so unreveal cards have less value than what they did before, and especially unreveal cards where you can't play before turn 4. So, namely, we've seen the fall of Shang-Chi lately. We're seeing the fall of, Plog or Junk or however you want to call it. That looks to be what's going on right now. And weirdly enough, Hela is still holding strong, but I don't think Sage is. I think she was weak to begin with, on the weak side to begin with, probably the worst card of the month, but with Leech being what it is right now and the meta being what it is right now, you maybe buy her in case she gets buffed, maybe another US agent. But that's
so
all.
You think that's it? That's like the only possible reason to buy her is like, what if they buff this card?
I mean, the only possible reason to get her is if you're missing Living Tribunal or Legion and you want one of those two cards and you get her by accident. That's the only reason you can get her.
I kind of feel like I have to agree with you here because part of my thought process is like, okay, this is a card that makes sense with Clog, but also this is a card that you want to play on turn 6. And so one of the good things about the Clog decks right now is between US Agent and Shang-Chi, they have a lot of ways to clean up Doc Ock messes, basically. And because they have all those ways, like Sage could be another one of those ways. Like you could see her in a deck like that is playing a Doc and Prey deck. And we'll talk a little bit more about those going forward. But I think one of the fascinating things about this card is it's a 3-drop that you want to play on the last turn of the game almost always, right? And if you are a 3-drop on reveal that gets played on the last turn of the game, you are probably going to get leeched, which means you are a 3-0. And that's sort of the fundamental issue this card will have with positioning right now. There are places where I can see this card being useful. I totally can see that happening, but I can't see it being extremely useful into a Leech deck, and I even can't see it being extremely useful into an Ultron deck. I mean, there's a lot of things with similar power in those lanes. You're not really getting a lot of value out of the Sage there. And I think so that those two matchups specifically make me a little bit worried about this card. This one feels like an, at the very least, wait until the weekend missions pop up to figure out if you're going to end up investing in this.
Yeah, exactly. This card just isn't it, because maybe as a card in a specific shell, it would have, had a chance to shine. It's not a surfer deck. It's getting out as a 3-cost card. It's getting outclassed by the card that just came out, Nocturne, in every possible way. Like she's not going to be like a 3-cost card you put in every deck by any stretch of the imagination. Maybe in specific shells she could shine. Like I mean, a very obvious shell is Mr. Negative or Surfer, but those two decks are suffering greatly right now, especially because of Leech. So I don't see this card even being. I don't think she's even going to be playable. She's just not doing anything right now.
So you mentioned the big bad of this current metagame in the context of Sage, Leech. So I guess we should talk about what Leech has done to this metagame, because to me it sort of feels as though he's constrained it a little bit. Like he's made the metagame a little bit smaller. It feels like this metagame was pretty wide, and like we were already in a spot where Shang-Chi itself was not actually that good. But now we have gotten to a spot where it's like, I think there are probably less Shang-Chi decks than there are non-Shang-Chi decks. And that correction was overdue. For the record, I think Shang-Chi was probably like a bad card for the last few weeks, right? Like, I think that is likely true. And we have gotten to a point now that Leech has forced everyone to make the correct decision. There's just a lot less Shang-Chi running around. And there's a lot less, stuff to deal with that. So there's the situation that Leech has created where the metagame is only allowed to be a couple different things, because you can't really be an anti-meta Shang-Chi deck or you get leeched. You can't really be a deck that is going out of its way to like create enormous amounts of power if the way you create those enormous amounts of power is an on reveal. So that sort of leaves you with only a few actual options. And a lot of those options are what we actually see in the metagame. You have like these ongoing Ultron decks where even if you don't have Ultron, you have like Onslaught and Claw and very strong things to do that way. And then you have these Leech decks, which are just leeching the crap out of stuff with Blink, with a Darkhawk package in there, with Clog packages in there, with whatever mid-range good stuff you want to be playing alongside Leech Blink. What is it that you think this deck has done? Do you think it's accomplished the goals of the nerf or the buff, I should say? Do you think it's the target of it very clearly to me being like Annihilus, Hela, Cannonball? Do you think that has been accomplished, or do you think that is the wrong way to go about this?
I think it's the completely wrong way to go about this. The way they treated, fixing in quotations the previous meta, because the previous meta I think was pretty good before the OTA. Previous meta was, as you said, very wide. There were a lot of different options, a lot of decks you could play, a lot of viable decks you could play. I saw people like just playing experimental decks even at the top of the ladder and doing pretty well with them because of how wide the meta was. And I think there was a little bit of, a couple of decks that were slightly overperforming, especially in lower ranks where the vast population of the player base is, and that's where you're going to hear the most complaints, namely Hela and Clog, or Anidex, if you want to call them that. And then instead of directly changing those, they decided to buff an answer, let's say. But they went about it the same way that they did with Loki when it was first released. Instead of nerfing Loki, they're like, okay, Mobius is going to fix it. But the problem is, it's not just, these cards are not just addressing the top decks that you want to hit. They're killing everything in between. It's kind of like, having a bug infestation in your house and burning it down instead of killing the bugs. That's what it feels like that they're doing, because you're killing everything in between. Like you killed Surfer. Surfer was slightly viable. A lot of people were playing Surfer. There was some on-reveal toxic decks that were doing great. Those died too. Like everything in between died because Leech is a thing now. So on-reveal, anything that's on-reveal and is played turn 5 and on is in danger of getting leeched and, being a dead card in your hand. And if you're not a completely broken card like Blink is, and if you don't work well with Leech like Blink does, most other on-reveals are just gone from the meta. And I think it was the completely wrong way to deal with the problems. But at the same time, I keep seeing posts from the devs, saying that Hela isn't a problem, when in fact, I mean, it might not be number-wise, but it is a problem because people are tired of, the RNG of the slot machine that is Hela. Just people are tired of it. Just a couple of cards and play Hela, and if the cards land, I win. If the cards don't land, I lose. It's kind of boring gameplay.
There are two really important things that you said there, and I'm going to try to remember them. I'm not very good at that, but I will do my best. Okay, because I'm going to address them one at a time. The first one is I'm going to go out on a limb and offer a defense of the Leech nerf or the Leech buff. Right? I get you're saying it's like, oh, he kills like Surfer and things like that. What it also does though is allow decks that are ongoing sort of analogs to Surfer to succeed. For example, there is a Cerebro 3 deck that I've seen people in the top 10 playing, right? Like it is when you are not invested in being an on reveal deck. Like on reveals on the final turn of the game have been how Marvel Snap has been played basically forever, actually. Like going back to original Sarah Control, Leech Leader, the original version, on reveals on the final turn of the game have been what this game has been about forever. So I don't actually hate putting people in a situation where instead of just playing the same stuff they've been playing, they have to go out and figure out an ongoing thing to do on the final turn of the game, an ongoing thing to like try and figure out what they're trying to do. I think there's value in that. I do. The one quibble I have with the Leech nerf, and this brings us to your second point, is that people are still playing Hela because not enough people are playing Leech. And that's like, if you're going to do this, if you're going to buff Leech, if you're going to be like, let's make Leech a thing that is everywhere, at the very least, I feel like it should destroy the play rate of Hela. That's all I ask, right? Like it should at least do that. And it did not seem to do that to me in an appreciable way. Because, like, yeah, okay, the Hela gets leeched. Sure, they lose that game. It's fine. But, like, most of the time, you know, there's chances that it's not in their hand anymore. There's chances that they top deck it. There's chances for a whole bunch of stuff. And it's just like, ah, man, you know what? I feel like if you're going to reintroduce Leech and sort of shrink the metagame down and make people figure out new stuff, at the very least, you should be dealing with Hela. And that sort of brings me to the second point, which is, yeah, of course, I'm pretty sick of the gameplay patterns of Hela. But I will say at this point, I do feel like there's enough that like reasonably beats it that I don't hate it nearly as much as I used to. Where it's like, look, I can play a Profex deck, I can play a Leech Blink deck. If I really want to deal with this stuff, I can deal with it. That's fine. I'm okay with it now. That said, in terms of gameplay experience, I think it's very unsurprising that a lot of really good players dislike Hela because it's a deck that allows a really bad player to beat them a lot of the time. Like that's the thing that good players dislike about it, right? Like they're playing a game and it doesn't really feel like they're playing it like any of their decisions matter. Good players play to like feel their skill matter, right? And in a Hela game, there's none of that. You don't feel any of that. And I think that the same way that it is important that people get mana screwed and mana flooded in Magic the Gathering, the same way that that is important to the functioning of the game in that it allows worse players to beat better players, because if they couldn't do that, the game wouldn't be fun. I think there is an argument for keeping Hela around. This is a kind of a devil's advocate thing, because like I kind of hate her, but I think there is an argument for keeping a deck that allows bad players to beat good players 45% of the time. I get it. I get why they would want to keep that around.
Well, I'm kind of a Hela enjoyer myself. Like I don't hate Hela. In fact, I love playing Hela. I feel like it's a relaxing experience. I don't need to think. I don't need to do anything. I just let the RNG guide the way, take the wheel, and I'm just there for the ride, you know? So I actually do not hate Hela one bit. I love the card. I think for me, it's super fun being able to relax a little bit instead of tryharding and you know, have a laugh when your cards all land on the same location instead of you know, one of them landing anywhere would have won you the game. But at the same time, I'm not talking just about myself, because our experience with the ladder and the game in general is very different than you know, the majority of the player base of this game. So for us, you know, Hela playing Hela or playing against Hela is not that often. We don't get to see her that often right now, because after things changed, you do.
Yeah, there's a pretty fair amount of like I said, there's more than I would think. Like there keeps
I don't see her like
being more than I would think.
I feel like I see her like maybe 1 in 7, 8 games, which isn't, you know, every other game or whatever.
Sure.
It's a big amount for any deck, but it's not an unreasonable amount of games. So I don't really mind it. But at the same time, like, I don't know if you're gonna buff Leech to answer that. It did answer Clog though. Like I'm seeing
Yeah.
significantly less Clog in the game right now because of the cost of Leech, I think. Because if you're playing Clog and then you play Sentry and the other person plays Leech on the same turn, you're kind of
Yes.
screwed.
You
There's
get
nothing you can
obliterated.
do.
I'm
Yeah,
seeing
you
like
get
specifically less Annihilus. That's the specific.
yes. Yes, a lot less than Ireland. So it did work on that part because that was one of the problems. And about the thing you said about Cerebro, I saw a lot of Cerebro too also, which seems to be doing the trick. And yeah, but even though people are going back to more ongoing and so on and so forth, still the meta feels constricted. It feels restricted. It feels like there's less variety of decks. And it feels like there's like a handful or maybe slightly more of decks that are viable right now, which wasn't the case before the OTA. And then if you're patching the game to, are you patching the game to make it better or just make it different? That's my question.
In that vein, let's talk about what we've been doing to beat Leech. Because one of the things that I've noticed is like as much as we've been complaining about Leech, and I will cop to I'm complaining about Leech a little bit, right? Like I'm not. I think you're a lot more mad at Leech than I am, and I'll tell you why. Because
I'm actually
every time I play a Leech Blink deck, every time I go like 50-50. It's just like the 50-50th deck of all time. I am not super climbing with these. And then I'll switch to like an anti-leech deck like Ultron. I'll just skyrocket up the ranks. And it's like, how good can this deck actually be if every time I play it, it just feels so mid? Like how good is it actually, and what is the reason that it feels mid?
well, I'm playing both.
Sure.
So I'm playing an Ultron Leech deck.
Jesus. Phenomenal. That actually does make sense, right? Because like a lot of what I've seen in like Blink Leech shells has been like a sort of inability to fuse the early game with the late game, where like
Yeah.
you're playing like Dark Hawk and Hope Summers, right? But if you don't get the Hope Summers, you're a deck with like 3/6 drops that can't actually play all the 6 drops. And so like all these like typical Leech Blink decks, I feel like they're in like this very larval state right now where like we're still in a condition where it's very easy to just be like, yeah, I'm just gonna play like the Claw Onslaught and you're gonna lose. Like that's just more points than what you have, right?
Exactly.
And
So what I did was there was this deck I found that was running Iron Lad Jubilee, and then the Leech and the Ultron package, which seemed like a terrible idea, right? Because you randomly hit Ultron, then you're constraining yourself. You don't have a lot of space to play. You don't have a lot of options. So I took that shell and I swapped out a couple of cards, namely 2 cards. I added, believe it or not, Howard the Duck and what's his name? Claw. So now that deck has Claw, all 3 cards that got significantly buffed in the OT: Claw, Ultron, and Leech. And it is surprisingly consistent. Having the info with Howard the Duck, like it's almost, if you have Howard the Duck in your hand, turn 1, it's snappable. That's how good that card is in that deck because you have so many info and so many ways to utilize that info. It's Jubilee, Iron Lad, and Blink all utilize that info incredibly well. And it allows you to always have the cards that you want on the board. And it feels like I have 100% chance of hitting Ultron every game. It's
KM
incredible.
Best does not endorse this message. KM Best does not endorse Howard the Duck. Despite the fact that this is on my channel, I do not endorse any of the things that are being said right now. I do not endorse Howard the Duck. I never will endorse Howard the Duck. You can't make me do it.
It's really fun. Dude, it's really fun. You should try it. You should try having fun sometime.
I have tons of fun without Howard the Duck. Somehow I have managed to have an incredible amount of fun without ever playing that card. I'm very proud of myself because clearly I've been playing on a handicap, right? The only way to have fun is by playing Howard the Duck, and
I love that
I've been
card.
doing it without him the whole time. Yeah, that's really incredible by me.
I love that card. I love that card. I love that card. I always said it. I actually have a command in my channel. When someone says Howard the Duck that says it's not worth 6K, don't buy it. But I love that card because I keep playing it, and a lot of people are asking, "Hey, is it worth it?" No, it's not.
Yep.
It's a terrible card, but I love it, and it's so much fun. Anyway, I just remember that while we were talking about anti-leech. Yeah, anti-leech is basically ongoing, and anything that doesn't get destroyed by leech, and that's what the meta is right now, and that's what it's going to be. The meta is going to revolve around leech. That's the new reality until they decide either to uh, bring it back to 5 or I don't know, some until they change something basically.
Well, I don't know. Like, I gotta tell you, this is the thing I was thinking about, right? 'Cause it's like, oh, the meta's gonna revolve around Leech. It's like, well, what if everyone else just realizes what I realize, which is it's easier to let someone else play the Leech and do your work for you. Like, it's easier to just let some other scrub can like do the work of policing the meta. I'll go play
Mm,
Loki. I don't care. Like that's
yeah.
that's like I wonder what happens when that realization sort of trickles down because that sort of feels like what the ebb and flow of this meta is going to be. Like you start with all this Leech stuff, then there's the stuff that beats the Leech stuff, and then there's the stuff that's good into that stuff, right? And then you circle back around to the Leech stuff, right? Because like what we're talking about is like, okay, there's the Leech stuff, the Ultron stuff is good into the Leech stuff, Loki is good into the Ultron stuff, unless they're playing Mobius. And then you know what really good into Loki is Hela. Hela beats the crap out of that, and then Leech beats that, and then we go in a circle again. And so I don't think it's not going to change ever because I think that realization is at some point going to hit more people. Like I think that is something that is real.
That's what happens always with the meta, right? It's circular. It starts
Yeah,
like one deck is very powerful, and then it beats everything else, and then the deck that beats that comes in, and then the deck that beats that gets beaten by the first deck, and so on and so forth. That's what happens every time, and that's what I expect. Surprisingly, yeah, you're right. I saw like Loki doing really well right now, and that's kind of strange because
it's
one
not.
would think,
It's not strange. That's
yeah,
really
but
broken card.
one would think that Loki decks would be affected by Leech as well, right?
No.
Because
So
you're
the
not
way it
always gonna
works,
have Loki on 4.
yeah, but like when you do and you play Quinjet, the game ends. It's
Yeah,
over.
I know.
It's actually just over, right? Like this is the best Quinjet meta for Loki in a while. There were like our previous meta was a pretty bad Quinjet meta. There's a lot of small stuff running around, or like Hella, where it didn't really matter. Like it wasn't doing anything appreciable in most of those games. This is a great Quinjet meta. This is like one of the best Quinjet metas we've ever had because like look what all these like the blink decks are all playing like 3/6 drops. You play them for 4. That's dumb, right? They're just playing like a bunch of big stuff. So Loki's in a great spot there, even against the Leech decks. It's in a great spot against the ongoing decks to the point that I'm playing Pixie Mobius in my Ultron deck because of how good Loki is against that when it just gets your stuff. Yeah, no, the card is extremely powerful right now and not altogether too vulnerable to Leech because, yeah, sometimes you don't get it on turn 4, but a lot of the time you do. It's a good card. And when you don't get it on turn 4, you still have like a very coherent Elsa Bloodstone type game plan. There's good cards in that deck. You can win games. It's just an interesting situation because the metagame moves cyclically. So as much as there's like this doomer instinct to be like, it's just going to be this forever, I don't think it is. I think there's going to be, as the metagame ebbs and flows, there's going to be different avenues of attack that show up in it. And I think that's
I
important.
I agree with you 100%, and I think that I actually don't really mind the Leech. It's just I mind the approach. You know,
Sure.
I'm not a Leech hater right now. I'm actually enjoying myself. I'm having fun playing Leech and playing against Leech. But I just don't like the approach. I just don't like the way that they approached the problems, quote unquote, in quotations, that the meta had. Because I think the meta before the OTA was
It was
almost
very good.
perfect.
It
It
was
was
very good.
almost perfect.
I will say the meta before the OTA was absolutely trending the wrong direction, which is like Cannonball was a monstrous awful card. Like it was trending the wrong direction. I'm not saying it would have gotten terrible immediately, but I'm saying like within a few weeks people would have been like, "Man, I'm really sick of this Cannonball thing. I'm really sick of this Annihilus thing."
Yeah,
And they
that's
did sort of head that off.
that's what I meant by almost perfect. I thought that clog that or the cannonball stuff were a little bit over the top, but that's it. Like that's all you needed to address, and then we would have like perfection.
So it's funny you mentioned the clog stuff, right? Because like one of the things that I've noticed is a huge proliferation of dock and prey decks. Like there are so many more like Magic on 3, Doc on 5, figure it out decks that I'm seeing right now. And like I have always had just no respect for them at all. I've never had any respect for a Magic deck, but like I play it and it's like, you know what? I get what's going on here. And so here's the analogy I'm going to draw. This is like the modern day Galactus, where it's like you do the dock thing, and if you're going to win, you're going to win. And they're like, okay, I guess I have to leave now. You win maybe the most 2-cube games of your entire life with this deck. This is just, you are either winning or losing horribly off of that magic in that dock, right? And like all the decks key off of magic and Doc Hawk. You need that 7th turn. You need it to not get turned off. You need that Doc Hawk to come down. You need to be like Shang-Chiing or US agenting those lanes. And it's totally 100% doable. And that's sort of the form that Cannonball decks have taken in this post OTA meta. And that's just a fascinating development. Is like Cannonball has gone from being like a Prophex Nihilist card to like a Doc Ock card all of a sudden. And I'm interested to know how long you think this is going to last.
I actually haven't seen any of these decks. I'm
Really?
looking at Untapped to see the decks right now, and
Yeah.
most of them are running Professor X still.
Yes.
There's one that's running Leech, that's doing a Leech Blink thing right now, but most of them are still running Professor X. I don't know. I used Doc Ock in my mill deck at the beginning of the previous season, which kind of took off. And then people, started realizing that it also works with Cannonball very well, along with Professor X. And that's where we are right now. I don't particularly have a problem with the deck. It does feel a little bit ambitious and a little bit of copium that it's going to work, but the numbers that I'm seeing here are actually pretty good.
Yep.
So even though I'm not familiar with the deck, it seems to be working.
It wins a massive amount of 2-cubers. Like, I've played multiple versions of this. I played the Leech Blink one. I played the Magic one with no Leech, no Blink. And, like, it just sort of wins a vast amount of 2-cubers. And one thing I noticed it was particularly good into is, like, there's, these Ultron decks. It crushes them. You go Magic into Doc Ock against that, they're done. Like, they're just the dunnest of done. You're gonna pull their Ultron. Like, it does happen, right? And so, like, you just end up in a situation where, like, that's just 2 free cubes every time you see them, basically. And that's a pretty good spot to be in, too, right? Like, it's not the end of the world. They have no way to interact with your magic, right? And that's the other thing that this deck is getting value out of. There's just fewer decks than ever with inbuilt ways to interact with your magic, unless they're running Nocturne, which is telegraphed, right? There's no, like, surprise reality stones coming out. It's not showing up right now. Even Loki, which I think is amazing, is not being played as much as I think it's amazing, right? I think it is better than the play rate that it sees. And that's a deck that has Snow Garden and even Nocturne if you're playing what I'm playing. But you're not getting robbed. You're not getting robbed as much as you used to get robbed. Everything that's turning off that magic is telegraphed. The Snow Guard goes into their hand. The Nocturne is on the board. You're not getting robbed anymore. There's no robberies happening. And that's another thing that I think is important to note, because a lot of the reason I had no respect for the Magic decks is the robbery, the rug pull on the Magic itself, when they're so reliant on the Magic. But there's so many decks that have no way to interact with it, and then every deck that has a way to interact with it is telegraphed. It's a turn delay. And so you end up being in a situation where you're not getting robbed anymore. And one of the big issues these decks has was they would get robbed, they'd win a bunch of 2-cubers and then get robbed for 8. But now they can't get robbed for 8. They're winning those 2-cubers and they're just losing the 2-cubers. That's fine. That's a much more reasonable proposition to me.
Yeah. You described it perfectly. I think based off what you said, the decks are very well situated right now. And Ultron decks really just hate Magic anyway. I've noticed that every time someone played Magic against me and I was playing an Ultron deck, it was very difficult to win because you don't have you don't have an insane amount of points. You just have a decent amount of points spread among all locations. And then if you get Magic, your opponent just has the time to outpower you in at least 2 locations.
Speaking of outpowering Ultron in at least 2 locations, you think you might have stumbled onto something with Shuri right now in terms of beating Ultron, right?
Yeah. I ran into a Shuri deck and then I just couldn't beat them. Like I felt hopeless for the first time in a long, long time. There wasn't nothing I could do. Obviously, they high rolled a lot, and they got their combo off many, many times. But it really did feel like I was hopeless against them. I'm talking specifically about Patriot decks. And the other thing is that I realized something that's very obvious, that Shuri costs 4. So
So you
she
can't
can't
get
get
leached.
leached.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
you just play her on turn 4, and then you don't need any more on reveals. You're done. I mean, maybe you need Taskmaster, but
Taskmaster is pretty important. Yeah, no, I mean, like,
yeah,
I am suspicious. Like, I think it's the right direction to go. Where it's like, if you're trying to beat Ultron and you don't want to play Loki for, I don't know, moral reasons, I guess. You're trying to beat Ultron. You want to do that by going super tall in 2 lanes, right? Ultron is a deck that is really good at getting 20 power in every lane, so you just want to get 30 power in 2 lanes. And
you know,
mm,
but other deck was really tall, and I tried it today, and it was doing really well, surprisingly.
what other deck?
It's an old familiar.
Okay,
Everyone loves
you can just tell
to
me.
hate Thanos.
I
Thanos
am
with
so
blob.
suspicious of that. I am so suspicious of that. That feels so suspicious to me because it's like, all right, I like free mockingbirds as much as the next guy, and I do think that it's the way that I remember playing Thanos against Phoenix Force, right? Like, because you just try to win 2 lanes really hard, but the numbers, I don't know if they add up there. I'm a little worried about those numbers.
No, just playing blob early. There's nothing people can do. There's no card in the game. I'm talking about Thanos Leech, by the way.
Sure.
Thanos Leech Blink. And then when you put blob early on the board and you know it doesn't die, that's one free location. And if you have Hulk in your hand also, how do they beat that?
Are you a Scar deck?
No Scar.
Okay. Because like
The
that.
one I tried was running Cal Obsidian, but no
Sure.
Scar.
But yeah, like going tall in 2 locations is a very compelling way to try to beat Ultron stuff. Going tall in 2 locations without on reveals is a very compelling way to try to beat Blink stuff. Because again, like when you have this Blink Leech stuff running around, one thing that's sort of like, I guess not really apparent about that deck is like it doesn't have that many points in it. Like it's a bunch of like, 10 to 13 power dudes most of the time that it's putting out on the board. It's not that many points. And so when you're playing a deck that can just be like, yeah, I also have 10 to 13 power dudes, you're usually able to force them into at least 50/50s on the final turn of the game. And like, I can see the argument. I just don't really think I want to play big Quicksilver to do that.
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but with the amount of Cannonball and Shang-Chi not in the meta right now,
Yeah.
it just feels like going tall might be
Yes.
something people want to explore.
Agree. There are no strings on me. Let's talk about Ultron. Ultron is, I think, a card that I look at and I'm like, are they going to have to take power off of this? Like, that is a serious thing I'm kind of wondering about right now. Like, I feel like maybe that could be a 6/7, that could be a 6/6. Maybe I'm really off base, but the Ultron deck has been either my most successful or second most successful deck this season. It's either that or Loki, right? And so when I'm talking about how that deck plays out, obviously there's a bunch of different builds of it. I do think mine is the one that is like the most forward thinking of them with the
Mhm.
Pixie Mobius stuff. But like you can be playing like Wave and Invisible Woman and Super Scroll if you wanted to. You could be playing Mystique. Like there's tons of options for the deck. It's just I think that like generally the way people play against you, you're best served by doing the Pixie Mobius stuff because it keeps your power hidden longer and you get to like get cube rate off of that. Whereas if you are waving into an onslaught, they kind of know what's up. Like they know what's going on there. If you are playing Invisible Woman, card on 3, card on 5, they know what the card on 6 is going to be. They know that's Patriot Blue Marvel Ultron. They're aware of it at this point. And so there's this situation where it's like that stuff has diminishing returns, whereas the Pixie stuff, they have no idea. They will never know what your possible range is. It could be anything. Anything could happen after a Pixie. And I think that dynamic is what is it feels very strong to me when I play the deck. But every Ultron deck right now is super legit, honestly. Like they're all just very good. If you are able to give those bots buffs, it's basically like better Doctor Doom most of the time.
Mhm. I agree. No strings on me is very, very good right now. But I don't think it needs a nerf. I think that even though it may seem that it's OP, I don't think it is. If we just let the meta evolve and adjust to the new reality of Ultron actually being a card instead of just collecting dust in your collection, I think people are just going to find a lot of ways and creative ways to beat that deck, and quite easily. Also, that's what I believe. And I'm very happy that that card is playable right now. I tried your deck. It's incredibly strong. I love the pixie idea. I love the angle of taking a deck that's very, very, very predictable and making it unpredictable through the pixie effect. And it's a great time to play pixie also. There's no Mobius right now. No one's playing Mobius. So yeah, it's well thought out, well executed. It's a very, very powerful deck. But I think they should give him some time to breathe or dominate the meta or whatever. I'm already seeing it. I'm already seeing Patriot trending down after the first couple of days, instead of trending up. Especially in the stats, it seems like it's going down and down and down and down on cube rate and on win rate. So let it breathe. Let's not have the Lady Deathstrike effect one more time, because I think Lady Deathstrike was nerfed not enough. Not.
You think they
That's
should nerf her
the
more? You think she's got to go back to
no, no,
5'5",
no, 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 no.
5'4"?
She shouldn't have been nerfed. They should have given her more time. They should have given the meta more time to adjust around her. She wasn't nerfed, like she wasn't killed. It was just one power. It's not the end of the world. But still, like, let her breathe. She didn't even get a month to be playable before she got hit with a nerf bud. So yeah. No strings on me is really good. I don't think they should remove any power. Let it breathe. Let the meta adjust and see where it goes. See where it goes.
Oh wait, no, I can't replace that. Actually, I'll just mention that we've called an audible. Now, you may have been waiting for us to talk about Loki the entire time here. However, as soon as we got to this topic, we realized, hey, we've talked about Loki kind of this entire episode a little bit. So let's talk about Darkhawk instead. Darkhawk being nerfed from a 5-4 to a 5-3. One of the fascinating things about that is I feel like I'm seeing more of it. Like, it got nerfed and I'm seeing more of it. And I think a lot of that is due to the influence of Leech, because it is a big guy that is not an on reveal, right? Like, it's just like, what is the largest non-leechable dude in the metagame? That's Darkhawk right now. But you agree you're seeing more of this card now after the nerf.
I think that it had the. I'm not sure I'm using the right term. I think there's a term called Streisand effect, where you shine a light on something that you wish to hide, and it has the opposite effect. I think that's what happened. Like, I think the notes just told everyone, "Hey guys, there's this card called Darkhawk that's really, really good, and people are not playing it right now. So we're gonna take wink, wink, 1 point off the top, and it's gonna be bad. Wink, wink." And everyone realized, hey, dude, Darkhawk's still good, and the whole package just not only is good, but it also annoys your opponent, which is what we want to do right now, because that's the meta. Annoy your opponent as much as you can so that they leave the game, and then everyone's experimenting with the card. Turns out it's still really good.
Who could have predicted it? Yeah, no, this is like they got super dunked on, right? They were like, why are you everyone's like, why are you nerfing this card? It sucks. And then like they put it in their decks and they're like, okay, you know what? I get it. I get why you nerf this card. That makes perfect sense, guys. Good job. Like, I get being mad about the Lady Deathstrike one, but actually that's the one I think is more defensible, because it's like, all right, you know what? If your numbers say that and you could take a power off of her and she's still good, because like I think right now, current Lady Deathstrike's a really underrated card. Like, look at all the Patriot decks, right? Like, you just play that into a Patriot deck. It's just like, oh my God, right? Like, they have a Patriot Blue Marvel. Ba-boom, ba-boom. It's done. We're done here, right? Like, that kind of stuff. Like, that kind of stuff. She's an underrated card right now. And meanwhile, Darkhawk is out here thriving. And so it's like, we're dunking on them for these nerfs. And it's like, I got to tell you, I kind of think they're right about them. I think they got those right, because it's like, Darkhawk is as good as he's ever been. Lady Deathstrike, I think, is maybe one of the most underrated cards at beating Patriot stuff right now. It's good into like a variety of decks, though. It's good into like Mobius stuff. The only thing that's holding it back really is that it gets leeched, right? Like, that's kind of it. And that is a fair counterbalance to the card. Now, I do think there's an argument for saying, okay, we're buffing Leech. That should hit Lady Deathstrike. Maybe we don't need to nerf her. Sure.
Exactly.
That's fine. I think that's fine, right? Like, if you apply that to Cannonball, if you apply that to Annihilus, you could apply it to Lady Deathstrike too. I think that's fine. If you want to say she should get her power back because Leech exists in this form, also fine. But the Darkhawk stuff especially, like, my reaction was, I don't really get this. And that was the reaction everyone else had to like varying degrees of volatility. It ranged from like, I don't really get this to like second dinner are incompetent, right? Like those were the those were like those the spectrum of reactions to this. And I gotta say, after playing with some Darkhawk, yeah, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, I get it too, but it feels like it had it would we the question is, would we be seeing this much Darkhawk if it didn't get nerfed?
I wonder. I mean, I think it's a natural reaction to Leech, not just like people getting Streisand affected, right? Like, yeah, that probably helped, but also like just natural reaction to Leech is like, let's play the biggest ongoing dorks we could find.
Yeah, but I still think it wouldn't be this much. It would have been maybe more than before slightly, but not like this much. It's currently sitting at the top of Untapped, I think.
Right, but like when you like again, like it's the Leech thing, right? Because like what's its competition at 5? Annihilus gets
Nothing.
leeched, right? Cannonball gets leeched. And so like all the things that would be being played alongside it in the 5-drop slot, they all got hurt by Leech. And this is the only one that didn't get hurt by Leech. And so it's like, all right, I guess we're gonna play it, right? Like it's like the third or fourth best 5-drop, because I think those other ones are better, but in the context of a metagame where there's like 20% of the decks you play are leeching you, it's one of the best.
It is, it is, it is, it is. It's just really funny. Turns out they were right, and then
Yeah.
we were harsh on them.
Yeah, we were like, this is like kind of my mea culpa. I don't think I was too harsh. I just said I didn't get it. I get it now. You're right. Yeah, it was a good nerf. Good call on the Darkhawk, guys.
I think we're always gonna have a Darkhawk issue because the problem is not Darkhawk himself.
Mm.
It's Cork and the other guy, whatever his name
Rockslide?
is. Yeah, Rockslide. I think the problem is in a game where after turn 1, you have 5 draws. That's it. After turn 1, because obviously they can't disrupt your turn 1, right? Your turn 1 draw. You're going to draw those 4 cards every time. So after turn 1, you have 5 draws. And then you disrupt a couple of them with rocks. Maybe you throw a Black Widow in there, and you're down to 2 draws. That's more than 50% of your total draws in the whole game. You're kind of, it's kind of too much, I think.
I have been a Korg fan for the longest time, but it's sort of contextual for me, where it's like, I think the when Korg is at his best is against decks that are playing all of their cards. The same goes for Rockslide, right? These cards are at their
Combo
best against
decks.
yeah, like against decks that are playing every card in there, like they combo decks that need to get disrupted, but also like if you're both playing Zoo or whatever, them drawing a rock, you drawing a real card, it's a really impactful difference, right? So it's about that dynamic, and those are the metagames that these cards tend to shine in when resources are either being restricted or when everyone is playing all of their cards, right? And one thing that's restricting resources right now is Leech. We're back to Leech, right? You get your hand leeched, you draw a rock, you're just like, oh my god, I don't I don't have stuff unless you built your deck to be good against Leech, which is what most people are doing right now. But yeah, that is what I think makes that stuff strong. I think that just Darkhawk generally, though, like 13, 15 power out of a 5-drop, very above rate. You're very fine with that, and you can very easily make sure they have 5 cards in deck, right? And
Yeah, and
so
no Shang-Chi either, so you're not afraid of that.
yes. And so when you look at again, like you look at all these, like, there's people playing Red Hulks, right? There's people playing Doctor Dooms, Magnetos. He competes with those cards on size for one less energy. And that's really the whole thing here. Is he competes with those cards on size, he does not get leeched, and his package is disruptive.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that Leech is paving the way even more because the best answers to Darkhawk outside of Shang-Chi are also on reveal. Whether it's Rogue or Enchantress, those cards get hit also, and you're gonna keep them in your hand because you don't want to play them early anyway. So yeah, Darkhawk is really good right now.
Final topic of the day. A question people ask me a lot: is Nocturne worth buying? I think at this point, looking ahead to the future, I would say the card Nocturne is worth acquiring. When you look at Sage, when you look at Nomura, I don't think they have a ton of future in a metagame like this. Sasquatch is exciting and interesting for sure. But in this current metagame, I think Nocturne is, and this is the big worry for me when I recommend cards, because I think she ends up looking a lot like Red Guardian, maybe, where it's just like this is a card you're going to see all the streamers run in a bunch of different decks. She's always going to be in those decks, but she's not going to be required to play the deck, right? She's going to be like, oh, this is a really good thing to have, but you don't need her. In much the same way as like, imagine if there was like a Jeff, imagine Jeff, but like in every non-Angela deck or non-lockdown deck. She's going to be like that, where it's like, Jeff is better, to be clear, but like that is the comparison you want to make. She's somewhere between Red Guardian and Jeff, where she's either a luxury purchase in the vein of Red Guardian, where like, it's amazing if you have her, but she's not a build around, right? Or she's like a Jeff type card where she just gets running everything. And I'm not sure which of those she is yet, but I think I'm leaning towards her being a worthwhile use of your tokens, just because I do think you're probably going to play her in a lot of different stuff.
I think she's probably going to be the best card of the month. That's in, in the keys, not the season pass. Yeah, I think she's probably going to. She has a chance of being the best spotlight card of the month, depending on where Sasquatch lands, because the other two are not even. We're not even going to talk about it. I had someone describe Nocturne as the quintessential. I don't know if I'm using the right word there.
Quintessential.
That word, yeah, exactly. That's what I said. Anyway, the quintessential good card in the game, and like she's a definitive good card. That's what she is. She's a good card, and I agree with you. She's more on the luxury side of cards that you're gonna acquire, but I don't think you're gonna regret buying her. She's kind of like as good as Jeff in almost I would say in every deck except Lockdown. Right?
I think she's worse than Jeff in every Elsa Kitty deck. I think she's worse than Jeff just because of price, right? Like she costs 3 Jeff.
Yeah.
She's worse than Jeff in all of those, and she's probably worse than Jeff in Lockdown, but she's very similar to him in everything.
I'm seeing a lot less Elsa though. Outside of Loki, I'm not seeing Elsa.
I mean, I'm playing Loki, so I'm playing Nocturne and Loki, so there you go. But like she's still not as good as Jeff in those decks, just because she costs 3 and he costs 2.
Yeah.
But like,
just for the cost, she's like a 3-cost Jeff is like the best way to describe her. Obviously, Jeff is always going to be a better card than her, but if you have a card that's comparable to literally the best card in the game, because that's what Jeff is, then how do you not buy that?
Yeah, no, I think that my big worry with Nocturne when she came out was like, did they just actually make another Jeff? And I think that has been alleviated. I don't think she's Jeff. She's halfway between Red Guardian and Jeff. And that means that it's like a much more difficult purchase recommendation, unfortunately, because it's like, you're never going to need her, but you're always going to want her. You're never going to need her, but you're always going to want her. And that's how I would describe Nocturne.
But look at it on the flip side. I don't think you're ever going to regret buying her either.
Yeah, that's probably true. Like, you're going to find homes for her. You're going to find homes for this card.
You're not going to be like, oh, I bought this card and it's useless. It's not a war machine.
No.
Right?
Good Lord. No, it's not a war machine.
So if you buy her, you're going to play with the card. So it is kind of a luxury purchase. But on the other hand, what else are you going to buy? If you've been playing the game for a long time and you're just looking for new cards to get, what else are you going to buy?
Right. I don't think she's like strictly a luxury purchase. I just think like comparing her with Jeff is like a very hard comparison for her, because Jeff costs less, has a better ability, goes in more things as a required piece, right? Like, he's a more integral piece to an Angela deck. He's a more integral piece to a Lockdown deck. And she's worse in every way on those respects. But she's also just, yes, you do want to call her 3-drop Jeff because she is that good. Like, she's a very, very good card.
She is. I was on the fence on her, and I said I was gonna, on recommending her, I said I was gonna make my decision on Sunday, and today's Sunday. I don't know when guys are gonna watch this, but yeah. And now I'm sure, like, for me, she's a purchase. You're not gonna regret buying her.
All right, thank you so much to Ordinary Harry. For those wondering where Lamby was, he said he came down with a sickness. I'm doing my best to not do the ooh joke there. I did it anyway because I have no self-control. thank you so much to Ordinary Harry for 3-time guest star on the Snap on 8 Cubes. Wait a minute. Does this mean that you are now? I think you are the longest tenured guest host. We've never had a guest host that has done more than you. This is
Oh,
now.
that's
This is
thank you.
you are the guest host with the most at this point. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I love talking snap with you, dude. Like anytime you want me to come here, you just have to say the word and I'll come running because I just love talking snap with you. It's always a pleasure being here, picking your mind and then looking at the way you think about the game because you do tend to be more level-headed than I am and think about the game in a more, you know, step back and look at things more neutrally than I do. I'm very passionate about some things, and it clouds my judgment. I know it. I know it, and I
It
say it.
sounds like
So
you're describing yourself as a Sith Lord. Like this is like the speech you give to like Anakin Skywalker.
maybe that's what I am. But yeah, thank you for having me.
No, thank you
Even though
so
you just
much.
called me a Sith Lord.
I mean, I would take that as a compliment. I always wanted to be like a dark side guy when I was like a kid, right? They were doing the cool stuff. Their stuff was cooler. It was better aesthetics. I don't know. As always, thank you not just to Harry, but to everyone who made it through that episode. I know it's an extra long one. That's what happens when Harry's here. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, I've been Cam Best. He's been Ordinary Harry. We will see you in the next one. I guess I probably shouldn't have said that. We will see you in the next one, but
Yeah, well, you'll see KM in the next one.
you'll do it. It'll be fun. We'll get Harry back on, I'm sure, because he has been the guest host with the guest most. Thank you so much.